Imagine crossing an international border into a country that officially does not exist. You show your passport, guards stamp it. You pass through customs. You exchange your currency for money that no bank outside this territory will accept. You drive past a government, a parliament, an army, and a flag. And yet, on almost every map in the world, this place is blank. This is Transnistria. Wedged between Moldova and Ukraine, Transnistria is a narrow strip of land running along the eastern bank of the Dniester River. It stretches roughly 400 kilometers from north to south, but in places is no wider than 40 kilometers across. Its capital is Tiraspol. Its population is roughly 465,000 people, a mix of Russians, Ukrainians, and Moldovans who have lived here for generations. It has its own government, its own military, its own police force, courts, and constitution. It even prints its own currency. But here is the thing. Not a single United Nations member state officially recognizes it as a country. Not Russia, not Ukraine, not even Moldova, the state it broke away from. Transnistria exists in a legal gray zone that has lasted for more than 30 years, and understanding how it got there requires going back to one of the most dramatic political collapses of the 20th century. In 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved. Almost overnight, 15 new independent republics emerged from the wreckage of an empire. Borders that had been administrative lines on Soviet maps suddenly became international frontiers, and millions of people found themselves in countries they had never chosen. Moldova was one of those new republics. For decades, it had been a Soviet state on the southwestern edge of the USSR, home to a diverse population, Moldovans, Russians, and Ukrainians living together under the same flag. But as Moldova moved toward independence, tensions rose sharply. The new government declared Romanian the official state language and began dismantling Soviet-era symbols. For many in the Russian and Ukrainian-speaking east of the country, the industrial heartland along the Dniester River, this felt like erasure. They had a different identity, a different language, a different loyalty, and they were not prepared to simply accept the new order. In September 1990, before the Soviet Union had even formally collapsed, the leaders of the eastern region declared their own republic, the Pridnestrovian Moldavian Republic, Transnistria. Moldova refused to recognize it. Tensions escalated into armed conflict. In the spring of 1992, war broke out along the Dniester River. Moldovan forces fought Transnistrian separatists in brutal urban combat through the bridge city of Bender. Hundreds died on both sides. Then something decisive happened. Russia's 14th Army, already stationed in the region since Soviet times, intervened. Under General Alexander Lehbed, Russian forces effectively halted Moldova's advance. A ceasefire was signed in July 1992. Moldova could not retake the territory, and Russia's soldiers never left. Today, approximately 1,500 Russian troops remain stationed in Transnistria, described officially as peacekeepers, protecting an enormous depot of Soviet-era ammunition at Cobasna, one of the largest such stockpiles in Europe. The war ended, but the conflict never did. So what does life actually look like inside a country that doesn't officially exist? Walk through Tiraspol today and the Soviet Union is still very much present. Lenin's statue stands in the central square. The hammer and sickle appears on the flag. Soviet-era architecture lines the boulevards. The government is structured like a conventional republic. A president, currently Vadim Krasnoselsky, leads an executive branch. A parliament called the Supreme Soviet passes laws, courts operate, ministries function. The military numbers around 7,500 soldiers, small by international standards, but significant for a territory of this size. The currency, the Transnistrian ruble, is printed locally and accepted nowhere outside the territory. Citizens who travel abroad rely on Moldovan, Russian, or Ukrainian passports instead, since a Transnistrian passport will not get you through most borders in the world. And then there is the economy. At its heart sits Sheriff Enterprises, a vast conglomerate that controls supermarkets, petrol stations, a television channel, a mobile network, a luxury hotel, and even a football club that has competed in European competition. Sheriff does not merely operate in Transnistria. In many ways, Sheriff is the economy. For ordinary residents, daily life carries a strange duality. Functioning institutions, recognizable rhythms, a society that largely works, existing within a political limbo that the outside world prefers not to think about. The obvious question is, why has this situation lasted more than 3 decades? The answer lies in a careful balance of interests that no single party has enough power or enough desire to upset. Russia benefits from Transnistria's existence. It provides a forward position in a strategically sensitive region, a community of Russian passport holders to protect, and subsidized gas supplies that create economic dependency. For years, Moscow supplied cheap Russian gas to Transnistria, which the territory used not only for itself, but for profit. Moldova, for its part, has been too weak and at times too divided to force a resolution. Its path toward European Union membership depends on stability, not confrontation. International negotiations have dragged on for years through the so-called 5+2 format, involving Moldova, Transnistria, Russia, Ukraine, the OSCE, the European Union, and the United States. Progress has been minimal. A frozen conflict, by definition, is one that nobody is quite ready to thaw. Then Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, and the ground shifted. Transnistria suddenly found itself geographically surrounded by a war zone. Ukraine, which shares its eastern border, was now a battlefield. Moldova, to its west, accelerated its bid for European Union membership. The consequences were immediate and severe. In January 2025, Russia halted natural gas supplies through Ukraine. Transnistria, which had depended almost entirely on that gas, was plunged into an energy crisis. Heating failed, industry stalled. The economic model that had sustained the territory for decades collapsed almost overnight. For the first time in 30 years, the future of Transnistria looks genuinely uncertain. Could Moldova find a way to reintegrate it peacefully? Could Russia, distracted and weakened by war, loosen its grip? Could Transnistria simply persist, as it has before, by outlasting everyone's attention? Nobody knows. And that uncertainty may itself be the most Transnistrian thing of all. Transnistria remains one of the world's most unusual places, a country that functions like a nation, yet officially exists on almost no map. Thank you for watching. This documentary was researched, written, and produced by the Behind the Map team.